was good. I'd like to welcome our next speaker, Joan Gass. Joan is the Managing Director and Head of Groups at the Center for Effective Altruism. Joan oversees the Groups team, leading CEA's work on the growth and onboarding of new community members and providing input on organization-wide strategy. She has an MBA from Stanford and an MPA in International Development from Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. She previously worked at Bain & Company, where she was a founding member of their Nigeria office. She also co-founded and directed a nonprofit in Uganda and launched a fellowship related to catastrophic risks and emerging technology policy at the Harvard Kennedy School. Please note that for this talk, about 80% of the content overlaps with the talk Joan gave at the most recent EAG. So a refresher for some, but hopefully new to all of you. If you have any questions for Joan, you can use the Swap Card app. If you click on the event, live discussion, and the questions tab, I'll be pulling questions from there to ask to Joan after her talk. Okay, please give a very warm welcome to Joan Gass.
McKinsey spends $1 million per campus per year on the campuses that they recruit from. This is the norm in elite professional services industry, standard for companies like Goldman and McKinsey and Facebook, spending millions of dollars per campus. Meanwhile, this generation of college students cares more than any generation before about having a positive social impact with their careers. But at least in my experience, career services don't have some of the support for those students. Sometimes they're understaffed or unrigorous, telling students to just follow their passions or handing out Peace Corps brochures. I think we're failing to support smart, ambitious, young college students who want to make a meaningful impact in the world. And I think this is why I'm really excited about effective altruism field building at the university level. I think university is a critical window. For some people, it's the first time they think seriously about their priorities in life, what kind of change they want to make in the world. For many, it's a time when they make peer groups, friends that will have lifelong implications. And for some people, university is a really important time where they're not quite locked in yet to a certain career, where they have the opportunity to think through what they want to do with their life, what kind of major they want to have. I know at least in university for me, we didn't have to choose our major for 2 years in because I changed mine 3 different times. So a lot of different times for exploration at university. And I think it's possible for individuals to, adopt worldviews and values that will change the trajectory of their life later on. But I think that the university is a really critical time. We're going to adjust the slides. Thanks, Ollie. And to support that, we're a database community. So here's some data. This is from the EA survey in 2019. On the y-axis, you see whether or not people are highly engaged within effective altruism. On the x-axis, you have the year when people first heard about EA ideas. So basically what you can see is on your left-hand side, ages 18 to 22, if people first hear about EA ideas around that time, they're more likely to be highly engaged. This is echoed by some research that the long-termist movement building team did at Open Philanthropy, where they interviewed about 200 people, in-depth surveys of individuals that had long-termist careers that they were particularly excited about. And individuals that filled out the survey reported that they heard about EA or EA-adjacent ideas for the first time when they were 20 and wish they had heard about them even earlier, when they were 16. So I think it's pretty clear that there's an opportunity at university campuses and that the university timeframe can be a really critical time to share ideas that could help individuals shape their opinion about what matters in the world. I want to paint a 2024 vision for what could be possible for us collectively as the EA community. Now, this is work in progress. We should totally iterate and change as we learn more. But as a starting point, I think by 2024, for the top 200 universities around the world, and I don't just mean the top universities in Europe and the US, I also mean the IITs of India and the University of São Paulo in Brazil, the majority of students will have heard about effective altruism ideas. And those who are curious will encounter a nuanced version. This might look like, for example, a student being really excited about their activities fair and interacting with their EA group there based on a conversation, or seeing a catchy flyer for an 8-week reading group related to figuring out how to do the most good with their career. And something that we're focusing a lot on at the Center for Effective Altruism is making sure that student leaders at these universities aren't recreating the wheel, aren't having to do this from scratch. That's why we have our University Groups Accelerator program. If someone wants to start an effective altruism group at their university, they receive a stipend, connection with a mentor who's done that before and will meet with them every other week, materials and funding for supplies such as posters, flyers, funds to buy takeaway for discussion groups, and what I think is the bread and butter of a first-year group, an 8-week reading course with a thought-provoking curriculum, questions, and exercises, and facilitator training to help participants explore ideas where they disagree or have differing intuitions. Now, the goal here isn't to convert individuals into effective altruism. It's to introduce tools of careful reasoning and point out key philosophical and economic considerations that might be critical for an individual to explore how they can most contribute positively to the world. What I want is for students in these groups to have the most meaningful conversations they have at university. The past semester, we had 65 universities at the level of running these 8-week reading groups. The start of last school year, we had 15. So I think it's totally possible to triple this in the next 2 years. And in some places, I think we'll go even deeper. By 2024, I wouldn't be surprised if, as a community, Open Philanthropy Project had funded 12 campus centers with dedicated office space and several full-time staff. We've already got the vast majority of this running at Cambridge and Stanford and Harvard and Oxford, and I think it's very plausible we'll triple this in the next 2 years. But here's the thing. With ambitious entrepreneurs, we could do so much more. I think about EA field building at university as writing a book, and we've written the first chapter. It's a good chapter. We can still work to refine it, and we need a lot of smart, talented people to help us write the next chapters. For example, it seems very plausible to me that someone in this room could help run a pre-first year orientation program piloted at their university that then scales across other university campuses, or sets up a model of how to work with professors to have EA course content into popular first year courses, or runs career programs that are so good that the Career Campus Center starts copying them. And the thing that I think is really exciting about all of this is who's well positioned to do it. And I think that's people who are in university themselves or recent alumni. And this is kind of mind-boggling because I think that most of the things that we're trained to do, you have pinnacle impact in your career decades into specializing on it, in your 50s or your 60s. But EA field building at university is one of the times when you're an expert, when you're in your early 20s. It's an opportunity to have a uniquely outsized impact for your age. Now, what are some of the things that make this a uniquely outsized opportunity? I think first is that people who are students or recent alumni know the users. You know how to talk to students around you. You know different considerations, what's on people's mind. And you also know the campus and the culture, what kind of pizza actually attracts people to meetings, when to do certain events, which kind of initiatives professors are starting that might overlap with some things you're interested in doing. That's why we have students working part-time on EA outreach while they're studying in university, taking gap semesters or taking gap years, and working full-time after they graduate. And one career path that's really exciting is you can join a campus center working full-time, even if you didn't go to that university. If you're a university student, I think there's a chance that the next 1 to 2 years could be the most impactful years of your career. It's certainly not guaranteed, but I think it's possible. And I think the basic argument behind this is the concept of multiplier effects. Why would field building be so valuable? When I think about this, I think back to the people that were in my group when I was doing field building at university. And so looking back, one of the people that was in my group went on to help start a charity with charity entrepreneurship and now works as a data scientist at the World Bank, where they're directing a lot of World Bank resources. Another one helped do advocacy work that got plant-based meat into fast food companies across the United States. Another person specialized in pandemic response and preparedness and helped direct $16 billion of pandemic funding during the COVID-19 response. And one of my favorite stories is about a friend who was trying to figure out what he was going to do his PhD on. And he came to an EA meetup a couple months before he had to choose his advisors. And so he ended up changing his focus to emerging technology. And it was a really pivotal point because if he had waited a couple months later, he wouldn't have been able to change his advisors. And in the fall, he just started a job at the White House. So I think that the idea of doing field building is really exciting because if you could help share EA ideas with someone who's going to have as much impact or more than you, then you've just multiplied your overall impact. And I think this sentiment is echoed by experts in the metaspace, who think that this could be one of the most, if not the most important decade for movement building. And the argument goes something like this. If you think we're going to get bigger as a community, then opportunities for movement building will be less good in the future. And also, if you think we're at a hinging moment related to transformative technology, then doing things earlier matters more. To echo this, Buck, who is the fund manager on the EA Infrastructure Fund and the CTO of Redwood Research, an AI safety organization, wrote up a memo where he said, "My current guess is that if you're able to do student group organizing, don't massively hate that kind of work, or at a suitable school where there's a student group that has less than two full-time equivalents working on it, then there's more than a 50% chance that an optimal allocation of your time over the course of your undergrad degree would involve you spending at least one full-time year on student group organizing." He goes on to say it's quite rare for someone who is university age to make a contribution to EA that impresses him as much as people who run good student groups. So I've tried to outline for you the opportunity that I think is available, where we could get to in 2024, and why I think university might be a particularly important time. Now you might be thinking, yeah, but Joan, like really me? Like, what are the type of people who do this type of work? So I just want to go through a couple examples of folks that inspire me currently that are doing university field building work. So Kuhan, who's in the top left corner, helped start Stanford Existential Risk Initiative, and in particular, the Stanford Existential Risk Summer Fellowship. Now, this was a fellowship where individuals could apply to do research related to existential risk over the summer and be matched with a mentor. They had hundreds of applications, and the summer internship became more competitive to get into than Stanford itself. Koki, who's in the bottom left, has helped with EA NYU Abu Dhabi, and I think is really helping shape what it looks like to have a multicultural approach for the intro program, and had a fellowship with people representing 17 different countries. Lilani worked at UCLA. While working at UCLA EA, she realized there was a bigger need for a retreat organization and infrastructure in the EA community. She received funding from the EA Infrastructure Fund to start an organization and is running several upcoming retreats with over 100 attendees and growing demand coming forward. Jemima and Tom are at EA Durham and are interested in starting an EA journal. They surveyed 80 young effective altruists and realized that over half of them would submit an article to an EA journal. They're continuing to work on it and opening up for submissions in September. They have a talk at the rest of this conference that I highly encourage you guys to go to if you're interested. Kirsten from EA Blue in the Philippines, it's above, helped start a university group in the Philippines, wrote a great post on the forum related to new models of how to recruit a leadership team, a member engagement system, and ensuring handover when she graduated. And many of you guys might know Dowie, who's in the top middle. He ran a successful group at Durham, graduated, and then moved to Cambridge full-time to work on EA Cambridge. EA Cambridge is doing a bunch of great things, but one thing you might have heard about is their cause-specific fellowships and reading group. Their AI Safety Fellowship, I think, is one of the best learning opportunities for university students if you're interested in skilling up on AI safety. And I know this because I also know people from 80,000 Hours in the Center for Effective Altruism staff who are currently learning through that fellowship. So Kuhan wrote this forum post about running Stanford EA, and in that they said, you, yes you, can do similar things. We're not that special. We're mostly an unorganized team of students who care a lot. I think the thing that they will emphasize in this post is that they have a mindset of feeling like there's a strong sense of urgency about the state of the world and a way to make it better, are working hard to figure out what the best path is forward to make an impact, and are taking ideas and implications seriously. Okay, so why should you consider field building? I'm just going to talk about a couple skills that you'll develop, and then the case against doing it, because it's an EA talk, so I can't give you a pitch without giving you reasons why you shouldn't consider not doing it, and wrap up with some next steps. So I think EA field building at university is really great for skill development. You get to practice people management, recruitment, project management, how to build an organization, how to communicate complex ideas. I think it's also good for individuals personally, for the leaders. They get to spend time being paid to meet key professionals and build up their professional networks and develop a deep understanding of EA ideas. As someone whose cause prioritization has shifted throughout my life, I really wish I had spent some time doing field building work and thinking deeply through my cause prioritization before doubling down on a specific career path. And university would have been a great time for this. I also think it opens up a bunch of different opportunities in terms of professional things. Both within the EA community, I often get asked for recommendations of group leaders because individuals know EA principles really well and are thinking creatively about field building. But also because individuals that do a good job within EA university field building have a bunch of competencies related to entrepreneurship and organizational growth that they can demonstrate. Okay, so who shouldn't consider this? I think the impact story has two parts. One is you could do this and help create multiplier effects. And then the other thing is that these multiplier effects are better than the opportunity cost, taking away time from your direct work. So, given that model, I think that you should consider this opportunity less if you think you won't be as good at creating multiplier effects. This might mean that you're still learning EA ideas, so you want to invest more before sharing them with others. Or maybe you don't feel like you have a track record about getting folks excited about these ideas, so you could be crowding out someone that could do it better. Or maybe you're at a university that's smaller or you don't think is particularly well positioned for EA outreach, or is already at the point of saturation. So those could be reasons why you might not want to do this because you don't think you have a chance at creating those multiplier effects. On the flip side, you might think it's not worth the opportunity cost of delaying your direct impact. Maybe you have an opportunity you can't delay, like a co-founder who really needs you right now. Or maybe you think that direct work is more effective than the multiplier effects. Something like if you in particular have really short AI timelines, then you might want to do, and you think you're well positioned to work on that. Okay, so that's my overview about why I think field building can be great in terms of skill development, but also some caveats about thinking if you're a good fit for it. So if you want to test your fit and get more involved, here are a couple last points. One thing you can do is volunteer at a local group. This is a snapshot from the EA Forum, the community feature that was recently developed. I love all the stars, looking at all the groups around the world. You can put in your zip code and see if there's a group near you that you can volunteer at. If there's not a group near you and you want to start a university group, you can join or apply to the University Group's Accelerator program. So you and a friend can put in an application to get connected to a mentor, a peer cohort of individuals that are also starting their university group, have ongoing resources related to how to start your group, and then after a year participating in the program, have access to a summer internship program and launch grants. There's also the EA Group's Resource Center, where you can see all the other resources that other groups have made that's organized on the website, and be connected to the group Slack and Facebook page where you can connect with group organizers around the world. After you've launched your group, there are a bunch of ways to continue to grow it. I'm just going to point out a couple opportunities now. I think the Global Challenges Project has a bunch of great resources, including retreats that you can sign up for, both to further your own knowledge and to meet other group leaders. They also have a student groups handbook, which allows group leaders to go more in depth with different resources they can run. And Open Philanthropy recently launched the University Fellowship Funding, which you can see on the right-hand side here. If you are spending 10 hours a semester or more and want to get paid for your time, in addition to getting funding for your group activities, these are opportunities to continue to grow your group. And finally, if you don't want to run a group or want to do something in addition to running a group, you could try an entrepreneurial community building project. So the Global Challenges Project, with input from the Center for Effective Altruism staff, has a list of projects of things they'd like to see happen in the world that they think could add value to this space. And something that I think is really exciting is you come up with a local innovation. It can be scaled across 65 plus groups. You can apply to the EA Infrastructure Fund, like Lilani did, for doing EA retreats, and that can allow you to test out setting up an entrepreneurial project. Or you can reach out to the University Group's Accelerator project if you've run a university group and be a mentor and continue to pay it forward back by coaching up other group leaders. And finally, along the way, I think it's really important to continue to build your own EA understanding. I think the best organizers have done an intro program and are skilled up at the level of the in-depth fellowship, can help individuals talk through their key considerations and navigate different cause areas so that they can help individuals figure out how to maximize their impact. There are some programs run through the Center for Effective Altruism and EA Cambridge's cause-specific fellowships, like the AI Safety Fundamentals course that I mentioned earlier, is also on the website. Okay, so just to wrap up, I want to take us back to 2015 Stanford. The EA group there was pretty legendary. There was Buck, who I mentioned earlier, the CTO of Redwood Research and the EA Infrastructure Fund, and Nate, who ended up being the CEO of Redwood Research. There was also Claire Zabel that participated in that group, who now leads Open Philanthropy's long-termist grant making on effective altruism. Caroline Ellison, who's a major EA funder and co-CEO of Alameda Research, and Kelsey Piper, the world's first full-time journalist on topics in effective altruism. Today, as I mentioned earlier with Kuhan, Stanford is home of a thriving group. But after this great list of folks that I mentioned in 2015, in 2016, the Stanford group went dark. People graduated and moved away, and there was only one active member for a few years. They ran some events, but nobody really prioritized the group, and it didn't cause anyone new to become deeply engaged. And in that time, we probably lost a few Bucks and Claire's and Caroline's and Kelsey's and Nate's. And that's a lot of missing impact. We want to make sure that future university groups are constantly thriving and growing and never go dark. We really need entrepreneurs in this room to help us, to make sure that the messages of Goldman and Facebook and McKinsey aren't the only messages that smart, young, ambitious students hear on university campuses. Thank you, guys.
Okay, we're approaching the hour, so if you do need to run off, please do. Joan and I can just chat here. A reminder, you can submit questions on swap card via the live discussion. I have a few already, but if there are more, you can add them now. Wonderful, Joan, thanks very much for that talk. Our first question we had was how you think groups can stay focused on presenting ideas versus recruitment or like pitching too hard. How do you recommend groups kind of find that balance between presenting versus recruiting?
Yeah, so I think often discussion and presenting key considerations as opposed to conclusions, or presenting principles as opposed to conclusions, can be a good way to do this. I kind of see like the role of group leaders like somewhere kind of like, this might be a bad analogy, I've been reading a lot of HPMR recently, but the Harry Potter sorting hat, where you want to be like, here are some considerations, or here are some things that you might want to think through, as opposed to telling someone like the conclusions that they have to believe. And I think the intro program tries to do this by, instead of saying like, here's a list of things you have to believe in order to be an effective altruist, it says, here are some ways to think about quantifying impact. Let's apply it to a particular case. Or here's this tool called forecasting. Let's see some critiques that are like for and against this tool. And so I think kind of focusing on the methodological tools and focusing on the principles, and then having debates about the conclusions of where those lead to, can be one way.
Okay, great, thank you. You mentioned earlier that you thought the intro fellowship, so a kind of 8-week program with readings and discussion, is kind of best practice for movement growth, or how to get started. Can you say more about why you think that and how that's come about?
Yeah, and I think I want to put this in the context of like, we've written a first chapter, like we should probably continue to revise it. It's like my current best guess, but it wouldn't surprise me if in 2 years we had kind of a different first year program that was even better. I think one thing that's nice about the intro program is the commitment mechanism to engage. So this, I think, draws on a lot of group organizers' experiences, but I'll talk about my own as well, which is when I was trying to run a group in grad school, I ended up like having EA discussion topics where I like, you know, had like one person that came, or like 5 different people that came the next week, and ended up sometimes eating like pizza alone by myself. And something that's nice about the fellowship program is because it's advertised as an 8-week course with a commitment up front to do reading, be prepared, and come to the discussions, I think it allows students to more deeply engage with the ideas, and have kind of this ongoing community that they'll go back and reflect to. And so I think the idea of being able to have an in-depth discussion as opposed to like one-off discussions with a bunch of different people just allows there to be the chance of getting a group to the point where a bunch of people have similar like methodologies that they understand.
Eating pizza alone that sounds kind of fun.
It was, my housemates liked it, brought the pizza back.
Someone asked about how to pitch EA materials, or talk about EA materials in more developing countries, since a lot of materials would have been developed for people in the UK or the US. How have you found translating these resources for people with different backgrounds to Western countries?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm just really excited about some of the student group leaders that are at the forefront of this. Koki and I were having, I don't know if he's around anymore, I think he dropped out, but we're having a conversation about this earlier today. Cecile from Nairobi, I think, has done a bunch about adapting EA to at least a Kenyan audience, and thinking about the law schools there. And yeah, common themes that I think have come up in those conversations are sometimes there's a balance between talking about EA cause areas and realizing that individuals have experiences where their family or friends might have like a really pressing humanitarian issue that's affecting them. So a conversation I recently had with Koki is, you know, how do you talk about EA cause areas when a bunch of students are affected by the Ukrainian crisis? And I also think sometimes there's a lot of value in thinking about who the who the philosophers and traditions are that are like local to different cultural contexts. So for example, in China, there's, instead of just talking about like Singer in terms of expanding moral frameworks or expanding moral circles, you could talk about Moist philosophy. And so, yeah, I think there's a really interesting question of, if we think about some of the EA ideas related to impartiality and expanding moral circles, or thinking about the long-term future, are there individuals within the philosophical tradition where effective altruism ideas are being spread that can be incorporated in that?
Great, thank you. We have time for one more question, if that's okay. Where do university groups in the starting up phase often fail?
A couple things come to mind. The first thing that comes to mind is, for the University Groups Accelerator program, we actually ask applications to have a co-founder or like another person that they apply with. And I think that's often, it's really hard to run an entire university group on your own. I think some people have like up to 5 hours a week to like volunteer or get a stipend. And I think the current model that we have with the intro program in addition to advertising is more than 5 hours a week. And so I think having another person, and maybe like more than 2 people to help bear the load, can be really helpful. I think that's also really valuable for succession planning as well, especially if you're at different years. So having more than just a year for the group to get off the ground can be helpful. So it comes to mind first.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks once again to Joan.
Nice.